Hi there, this is Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this week we have an easy tutorial. We're going to be painting roses in a glass vase on a black canvas, so a simple Valentine's Day theme painting that you can do. And I'm going to go ahead and go over the materials that I used for this tutorial. I only used one brush for this, a number 4 round brush, so this Princeton Velvet Touch number 4 round brush is the only brush that I used, with the exception of painting the canvas black. So if you have a mess up painting, you can easily recycle a canvas and paint it black. So sometimes I will use the Liquitex Basic, sometimes I grab this Apple Barrel paint, and this one dries in a matte sheen, so it's not going to be shiny, it's going to be flat, which is helpful for making your Liquitex or whatever brand you're using. If it's a satin paint, it makes it kind of show up more vibrant against the background. So I painted this canvas black, and the colors that we're going to be using are Titanium White, Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, Cobalt Blue, Mars Black. I used 2 different reds. I used Cad Red Deep and Alizarin Crimson. Feel free to substitute these colors with whatever brand or color you have. If you want to do cute little dots or hearts in the background, I actually did that with the pink, the medium magenta. But if you're not going to do anything in the background, you don't need that pink. You can also change the color of your roses. And I used a black paint pen to do that little I love you tag that's on the vase. So the first thing we're going to do is draw the vase. I have a template for this that you can print out. You'll need white graphite paper or possibly color chalk on the back of the printable to trace it, and then you can trace the design. I'm going to go ahead and draw this. It's a very easy, simple drawing. So the first thing we're going to do is draw our table lines. This is like a still life vase painting. We have a little table it's sitting on. It's about 2 to 3 inches, and I just took my T-square ruler. This is a regular piece of chalk, by the way, and I just drew a horizontal line all the way across. Then we want to kind of get the proportions of this laid out. So the height of the vase is equivalent to the height of our roses, to the top of our rose buds. So I'm going to make a little mark at the top, and then a little mark where that bottom of the vase will be. So that's the high part of the drawing and the low part, and then I'm going to mark the middle. So the middle is actually where the top of the vase is going to be. So we have enough room for our vase and our 2 roses in the vase. So you can change the shape of this vase if you want, but I'm going to do a simple sort of rounded shape. I'm kind of sketching a circle, but not finishing the circle. I'm leaving it open at the top. Then I'm kind of sketching 2 vertical lines to make the kind of the neck of the vase and the little base of the vase, like a trapezoid shape that is very kind of small and narrow. And then the 2 lines go up vertically to that little mark that we made. I'm going to make 2 sort of curved rectangle shapes for the opening parts of the vase. Make this a little less wide. So very simple shapes and lines for this. And then we can always adjust this when we paint it in. Chalk will erase on the canvas. You can use a wet paintbrush, or I found the best thing to use is a wet baby wipe. It gets the chalk residue off as it erases. So we'll do the stems. We have 2 stems inside the vase. Do that stem, and we don't want to go all the way up to that top line. We want to go up kind of halfway because we want room for our rose buds. And we're going to do very basic rose buds. So the top of the rose stem kind of goes out, trumpets open a little bit. So this side of the rose is going to be like a teardrop shape. And then this side of the rose is the left side of that petal. It's kind of opening. It flutes out a little bit. And then we have a line in the back so we can see the top opening part of the rose. So very basic shape. And then we can do the same thing for this next rose, only it's kind of going at a different angle. So I start with the teardrop shape. So we can have our teardrop shape be kind of opposite. So this one will start on the left side. So we're sketching. There's the left opening. And then on the right, we have this part of the petal. And then the top kind of oval opening. This one kind of ended up at a weird angle, but we can fix that when we paint it in. So we have our basic shapes. We have a leaf piece that's kind of sticking out over here. So a kind of a diagonal line. And then we can do a leaf on the end of that line, another leaf. I'm going to do 2 more leaves, so for a total of 5. And then there's baby's breath in this, little pretty white, tiny flowers. I can do the little stems for that, but it would be very tedious to draw all the little circle pieces in. So I'm just going to do the basic part where the stem is going to be. So very simple, basic drawing, and we can go ahead and paint this in. So we will be using the number 4 round brush for this entire tutorial. And because this is a black canvas painting, we want to kind of pay attention to the paints. So not all of the acrylic paints are going to show up against the black canvas. The ones that have kind of a white base to it are a little bit more opaque. But to combat that, I use white and I mix white with the color that I'm going to be applying to the canvas. So for example, I'm going to go ahead on my palette and mix green with white. That green was translucent before and now it's more opaque because we added white to it. The reason why I'm adding a little bit of red to this is because it gives our green kind of a more natural look. You don't want to add equal amounts of red to it because that's it's going to turn more of a brown color, but just little bits of red in there. It's going to make your green look a little bit more natural and not so much pastel-like. So that's the Cad Red Deep Hue, the Hooker's Green Hue, and the Titanium White. So we're starting with the stems. We're painting the stems that are inside the vase. So go ahead and paint just a solid line. We're doing a lot of round brush work in this tutorial. So these are thin lines, so I'm applying pressure to just the tip of the brush. The thin part of the bristles go to kind of a point. You don't want to apply complete pressure on that because you'll get a thick line. You want to do a thin line. So you want to hold your brush like you're sketching something with a pencil. And our chalk lines are going to get in the way, but we can always erase our chalk lines after our paint layer dries. So this one, again, kind of the same thing. So our stem kind of trumpets out a little bit as it goes to the top, but then it goes thin. So this stem kind of curves down into our vase. You can vary your color a little bit. So when you go to reload, we can grab, so that time I grabbed a little bit more green and not what I mixed next to it. But you can see how it doesn't show up that well on the black versus the part where it has more white, it shows up better. We can go ahead and paint our leaf in. So a couple tips for round brush control. So that's how we create a super thin line. You're holding it like you're sketching the pencil when you're really concentrating on the tip. When you want your line to go thicker, you press down, kind of release. When I do these leaves, I like to outline the shape first and then press down to fill the thick part of the leaf. So I'll go ahead and fill these leaves in, kind of using that technique. On my palette, what I'm doing is, I like to call it color variation. I don't know if there's an official term for that, but I'm grabbing kind of different amounts of that same kind of color palette with the green, the white, little bits of red. You just want to be careful not to add too much red, but this is going to create variation in your color. So see how that leaf ended up a little bit more brighter than the other one, just because I added more white to my brush that time. Kind of allowing it to blend on the canvas, but also you can mix your colors on the palette too. So these leaves have different variations of color. So we can go ahead and fill the rest of our leaves in using this technique. Little tiny stroke for the little stem of the leaf, and then kind of more pressure filling in that leaf in, and also kind of changing your colors as you go to reload. So each of our leaves have a sort of different variation in that color. I'm going to go in and make sure that the top part of our stem flutes out a little bit, just like a rose stem. So that is definitely thicker and it flutes out. So we're done with the first layer of our stems. We're going to go and do our vase next. We're going to load Cobalt Blue onto our palette, and if you need to freshen your titanium white because it has too much green in it, go ahead and load some more titanium white. So this is a glass vase and we're not filling it solid, but we are going to paint the outer line of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load blue and white onto my brush, about equal amounts of blue and white. And what I did just there with the towel was I wiped the ferrule. So when you have water on your brush, sometimes little water kind of drips down the ferrule, and we don't want water to kind of pool on whatever we're painting on. So it's kind of important to pay attention to that part. You want to really kind of wipe that part so it doesn't drip down and mess up what you're painting, especially when you're doing thin lines. So we're basically painting over what we drew with the chalk. Again, our chalk lines are a little bit thick and in the way, but that's okay. We're just going to kind of work with that and we'll erase our chalk later. So I'm letting this blue and white kind of blend together, painting this shape. If you end up making it a little bit too thick, we can always let that dry and then go back with black to thin that vase a little bit. Right here, very thin. So my blue and white just kind of shifts throughout that. So some parts, like towards the bottom, is a little bit more blue, some parts a little bit more white. And because it's glass, we're not going to be painting the over part of it, or just the outline part, but we will be doing a glare on it to kind of make it look more like glass. Go ahead and do the bottom part. So I did that mostly with just the white. Few little strokes in there. I don't want to cover it all up because it is clear, so we should see mostly black still showing through all parts of this vase. And then we can do the little ribs at the top. Again, we can do that color shifting thing with the blue and the white, just outlining what we drew with our chalk. I'm adding a little bit more blue in there and right here as well. Then we can paint the little water line. So we have very thin line, kind of curved, and then we can kind of make a line in the back. So that's where our water in the vase is. I am going to dry my painting with a blow dryer. You can also take a break and come back and wait for it to dry, but I really want to kind of reduce my chalk lines, and I'm going to go back over some of the base with black to kind of thin out some of the outer layers of the vase. So this is just a basic baby wipe. You can also use a soft paper towel and apply a little bit of water. I find this easier to use than a wet paintbrush because it lifts off the residue of the chalk. So I'm just going in there and getting rid of the chalk lines from the top of the vase downwards. I don't want to erase my chalk lines of the rose buds yet because I haven't painted those in yet. But this just kind of cleans up the area so that we can go in and kind of add whatever detail we need without that chalk being in the way. You just want to make sure, I'll go ahead and erase the lines of the leaves too. You just want to make sure everything is dry because you don't want to smear your painting. Then we'll go ahead and add Mars Black to our palette. This is an optional step, by the way, so the reason why I'm doing black is because I'm going to go in and kind of thin out some of the thicker parts of the vase that I painted in. But if you don't feel like you need to do that, you don't need to. So kind of paying attention to the negative space around the vase, make sure the shape is right. So down here, a little bit of black, kind of fixing that corner part. And this is the Liquitex, so it will shine or will dry in kind of a sheen. It might look different from the matte black. So if you wanted to use whatever color you used to paint the canvas background, you can do that. I just happened to grab this one. So inside the vase, I'm just going in, adding some black on the inner parts of it, to kind of thin the outer line of it up here too. Down here as well. And then next I'm going to show you how to do that glare that's on the glass, that sort of highlight on the glass. And we want to go ahead and rinse that black off to do this because we'll be using titanium white, and we're going to do what's called the dry brush technique. So dry brush means that we need a dry brush. Have a towel handy, wipe all the water off your brush, load your brush in the white, and then wipe it off again with the towel. You only want a very, very small amount of paint on your brush, so that when we do this glare, so I'm holding my brush kind of at an angle to make it thicker, your glare should be kind of see-through, so it's not solid, it's kind of scratchy. So right there is a little bit too solid for what I wanted to achieve. But like you can see, it takes a little bit more effort to get that paint on because it's so dry and there's not a lot on the brush. So have a towel handy, or you can even just wipe the paint off on your palette. So you don't want to do too many glares, just a few. I did 2 kind of rounded glares on the bottom of the vase and 1 on the left part of that neck area. Add a little bit of blue to the bottom base. A little bit of blue. Also dry brush style, not a lot of paint on my brush, so a little bit of blue glare on the rib parts. A little bit of white just on the left part. So that gives your vase a more glassy look. I'm gonna do one more. See how I held that brush at an angle to make that thick stroke? One more dry brush stroke on the left. And if you want to do more glares, you can. I would just advise not to go too crazy with too many glares. So we have something that looks like glass. Very simple techniques. And next I'm going to show you how to paint these rose buds in. So we will use the Cadmium Red Deep Hue and also Alizarin Crimson. So I'm going to load both of those colors onto my palette. This one down here is the Cad Red Deep, and the one little red at the top is the Alizarin Crimson. Let's start with the Cad Red Deep and add just a teeny tiny bit of white to it. Red tends to not be opaque, so if you're painting these and it's just too see-through, I might recommend painting it white first, but adding a little bit of white to your red, like this one right here, gives it enough brightness to show up. So I'm going to pick one side of the rose. I just happened to pick the left side, and I'm going to paint it one shade of red. The right side of the rose is going to be a different shade. So I actually added the Alizarin Crimson and add a little bit of white to it so it shows up. We just want it to show up differently. So this one actually ended up being a little bit lighter. We just want it to show up. So see how this right part is a little bit lighter than the part on the left, so that it differentiates the two different sides of the petals. So I'm going to add another layer, kind of more darker red. And then back here, the top part I'm going to make actually a little bit darker. So this is more of the Alizarin Crimson with not as much white, and you can see how it is darker and it's using that dark background without the white. It's showing up kind of more translucent. Added a little bit of dark on the bottom of this. You just want to be careful. We still want to differentiate between the right side of this petal. I'm going to slightly outline that with the white. Make this top part a little bit thicker. This bottom part a little bit darker. This top part a little bit thicker. We can do like this very slight sort of spiral thing happening at the top to make it look like that top opening of the rose. Blend that in just a little bit more, but again, we can still see the three different parts: the right teardrop part, the left, and the top part. So we'll do the same thing to this one. I'm just using whatever's on my brush right now. It's a combination of alizarin, white, red. The point is we want each part to be kind of a different shade and stand out. So we'll use adding a little bit of dark color on the base so it kind of blends up to the lighter color of the petal. And then on this side, I'll do darker colors. So I just grabbed the Cad Red Deep. Both Cad Red Deep and Alizarin are darker red colors, so we kind of make it look darker by not adding as much red to it. And then, so this part of it, it's a different shape, also a darker color. So we can still see that division of the two sides of the petals. Top part, hardly any white for the top part. So it's super dark at the top. And you can even do kind of a spiral shape at the top. I'm going to get this one to kind of flare outwards towards the right. There we go. Blending this bottom part just a little bit. You just want to try not to overwork your blending, because we still need each part to kind of stand out. I used a little bit of white, kind of wiggled my brush on the edge of the petal, give it kind of that textured, soft edge. And then a little bit of white at the top here. Let that one kind of flare out, so it kind of flares outwards. And then this part ended up being kind of brighter than I wanted it to. Instead of it being dark, use the white to kind of brighten it up. So we can still see the different parts of our petals. Next, we're going to do some detail work on the leaves, including the veins of the leaves. So I'm going to load more of the green and white on my palette. And I'm going to mix green and white together about equal parts. You need a lighter shade of green compared to the actual leaf. So if you need to add more white to it, you can to make it lighter. So I'm going to twist the brush. When you twist the brush when you load, that helps get that paint right there on the tip. So we're going to be doing little fine strokes. So when you do these really, really tiny strokes, you want to use just the tip of the brush and hold it very lightly like you're sketching with a pencil. So line down the middle, starting from the stem, and then diagonal lines going outwards from the middle. Line down the middle, very, very lightly using just the tip of the brush, and then lines on the side. So I did about 3 on each side. You can do more or less, probably at least 3 to make it look okay. It would look kind of weird if it was just 2 lines in this. So barely, so that that brush is just barely skidding across the canvas. That's how light I'm holding that brush to make that very thin line. You can even kind of outline the outer part of it. Gives that leaf a little bit of dimension. I'm going to then take my wet wipe and kind of clean up the outer area of the leaves really quick. Just be really careful. There's some residue chalk lines that I'm getting rid of. Just be really careful not to smear your paint. And so I'm going to add a little bit more detail to the stems of the roses. So I'm actually going to clean up the chalk line first before doing this. This part should be dry by now. We painted that stem a while ago. Get that chalk line all cleaned up. And then I'm going to do kind of give that stem a little bit more shape. So actually bring that top part kind of trumpeted open a little bit more, and then a little bump on the side. So the stem isn't exactly completely a straight line. That one, a little bump on the side. If you want to go in and actually paint the rose spikes, you can. I'm going to do the small leaves that are under our actual roses. And I made kind of a darker green. I mixed a little bit of red into that to darken that green. Just be really careful right here. If that red from the petals, if that's not dry, you don't want to drag that in there. But it's a different kind of leaf. It's a very thin, narrow leaf, curves. This one is actually going to kind of curve and wobble up a little bit, wobble down. So you can see the little leaves that are under our actual rose petals. We will paint some that overlap some of the red, but that red for me isn't dry all the way, so I'm going to actually just let that dry a little bit longer before I do leaves that are overlapping. So these are kind of like the leaves that are behind our rose petals. This little narrow pointed leaf kind of pointed downwards. So I'll add some more rose leaves under the petals in a later step. But right now I'm actually going to move along and do the baby's breath. This is super simple. We'll be doing stippling to do this. And that just means that, so this is titanium white. That just means we're painting little dots. So we're just doing little pretty clusters of white dots. You can also do the same effect with Q-tips or like a little bundle of Q-tip to do that. But I'm just using my round brush for this. So you're just doing little clusters of white dots. We kind of drew the branches of our baby's breath to kind of know the direction it's going in, but you don't have to use that drawing part. You can kind of make them go in areas that are not attached to the branches. So when you do these little clusters, some are larger, some are smaller, some are closer together, some are further apart. It kind of goes in between our roses. Such pretty contrast. There's a bundle that kind of goes up here on the left of the rose, behind the left rose. So you can pretty much just add your little dots all throughout. So next I'm going to do some more detail work, including the little stems on our baby's breath, some more leaves under our rose petals, and I'm actually going to do, since I have white still on my brush, little spiral at the top right there. I'm going to go ahead and mix white and green again. And then on the right part of this, just added a little highlight. I'll do this on the left side. Little highlight on that stem, gives it more dimension. This part, it's fairly dry, the red, but if it was smearing red, I probably would have just dried it real quick before doing this step. So another leaf, only this one is overlapping the base of that rose petal. So it's kind of a teardrop shape, but very elongated. So it's thick at the bottom, it curves and goes to a point. So you're putting pressure on the brush at first, you're releasing the pressure, and then it goes to like a point. And I just went over the other two that I did in before these with like a second coat so they would show up better. And then we can do the little branches that are attached to the baby's breath. So same thing, very, very thin line, little branch lines that are attached to your little white dots. So pretty much where we drew the chalk. And you can draw your own little branch lines that extend to different clusters if you ended up making more little white clusters. Next, I'm going to add some texture on the table. It's not super detailed. If you want to do like a faux wood thing on the table to make that look a little bit more detailed, that would actually look really pretty actually with brown. But I'm just going to use black and white, make it simple. And where that chalk line is, so this is gray. I mixed about equal parts, maybe a little bit more white than black. At least let it show up. If it was too dark, it wouldn't show up very well against the black background. And just kind of dry brush loosely, so behind the glass, but I didn't want to add too much color in that glass. Just kind of skidding my brush on its side, create that dry brush sort of texture on the table. We can do a little bit of shadow under the vase. Shadow wouldn't really show up because the dark, it's already dark. So, but if you wanted to add a little bit of blue casting on the table for shadow, you can do that. This is optional, but I'm going to take my black and just kind of loosely outline this part of the petal. Makes it stand out a little bit better. Just on the bottom part and on the side. Gives it a little bit of pop. And then on the top, just loosely paint a black spiral at the very top. You can add black to other spots. I don't think it needs to be outlined much. If you wanted to add some black on the leaves, the vein part of the leaves, you can. But I'm just going to let it be. On the vase itself, there's like this string ribbon thing that's holding a little tag that says, "I love you." I'm going to show you how I did that. So I did that actually with gray, but it would work with pure white as well. You don't want to do too much black because it's not going to show up very well. If you want to do it as a different color, you can do it as red or add a different color to your palette, or bright pink would actually look really pretty. But it's just a curved line that kind of goes around the neck of the bottle, and 4 very narrow loops. And then there's 2 little dangly string things that go down and kind of spiral. Gives it kind of a whimsical look. So this piece is just going to go down and then curl upwards. And then we'll let that dry before adding that little tag. So while our little bow is drying, we can add rose petals on the table area. So this is just any of the reds. It could be the Cad Red Deep or the Alizarin. So you're just making kind of a thick stroke. So you're pressing down with the brush very thickly and then just kind of curves back up. This piece over here, kind of the same thing, kind of pressed hard down and curl back up. You can blend some lighter color towards the bottom of those rose petals, gives it some color variation. And then I'm just going to kind of clean this up, clean up our chalk lines. Make sure that that's completely dry before you start wiping off your chalk. So when your bow is all dry, we can do that little name tag. So I'm going to just grab some fresh titanium white with my round brush. I want to paint a little rectangle. So we'll just load our brush in the white. Have a piece that is going down that's holding the tag. And then our little rectangle. Placement of it is going to depend on kind of where your little spiral loop things are. I had to extend mine out a little bit more to the left. And it goes kind of curved. And then I'm painting it in solid white. When this dries, I can use a black paint pen to write the letters. Little black dot right there. And then we can have a piece that looks like it's attached. So it looks like it's going through that little hole. So when that dries, we can use a black paint pen. This is the black Posca pen. I'm just going to write very narrow letters. We don't have a very large area to work with. But I'm going to do I love you. You can do a different message if you want. You can do a name. So my U is not going to fit, but we can easily fix that by adding another little layer of white over here on the right. And then when that dries, I can add my U. I can also use this paint pen to kind of outline my tag a little bit, kind of the edges, and make that stand out a little bit better. The few little bit of outlining on our strings. And that is basically it. I went back and forth on whether to add some kind of design pattern in the background, and I'll leave that up to you. So this is, it's simple with no pattern or anything in the background. But if you wanted to do like a message in the background or like little pin dots, so this is an example that I'll show you. I used the pink, and you can use a different color if you want. You don't even have to use the pink. You can use one of your reds. But I just did little dots. On the written part of this tutorial, there's another demonstration or another picture of this, and it has little hearts in the background. And I did those little hearts with a pink paint pen. So you can do that. But again, I'll leave that up to you if you want to leave it simple, or if you want to add something, a message or some kind of quote in the background would also look really pretty too. That is basically it. This is the conclusion of how to paint roses in a vase on a black canvas. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.